Oceans are what cover 70% of this beautiful and yet so fragile Earth. They are the backbone and the guarantee of life on our planet.
But today, a distressing menace lurks nearby: the invasion of plastic.
It's there. Every beach, every ocean in the world has this problem.
Dans la mer, je ne sais pas la quantité de poubelles qu'il y en a.
It's a disaster.
In some areas, there's more plastic than there is sand.
These tiny pieces actually end up on our plate.
I would challenge anyone to go out to any beach here in Hawaii and not find plastic on a beach.
We often do find little pieces of plastic in the bellies of our fish.
How do we change people's behavior?
It never goes away. It will stay in the ocean forever.
When we talk about the presence of plastic in the ocean, we imagine bottles and floating containers. Consumer products, when regrouped, would form this infamous plastic continent where legend has it we could all walk on top of it.
But what is it really all about? Where does the notion of this plastic continent stem from?
In each of our oceans exist circular currents which trap the floating debris originating mostly from large coastal cities, but also an increase in marine traffic. These currents, notably resulting from the Coriolis force, hold the debris for several years, then deposit the material on the beaches of the islands located at the heart of these areas called gyres or vortices. There are 5 existing gyres: in the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, the North Pacific, the South Pacific, and finally the Indian Ocean. The accumulation of this more or less thick debris is often located just under the ocean surface. Macroplastic is easily visible, therefore easy to pick up, or at least this is what we imagined.
And this led some to believe we could clean the oceans.
The Swiss foundation Race for Water, whose objective is to preserve our planet's water, organized an expedition in the heart of the 5 gyres to report back on the state of the oceans in regard to plastic pollution. This scientific and human adventure left Bordeaux in March 2015 aboard a racing trimaran. The aim of this Odyssey is to travel 80,000 kilometers around the globe, heading for various islands located in the middle of these 5 gyres. The speed of the trimaran allows the completion of the Odyssey within 300 days, leading to obtain comparable scientific data. The study undertaken by the Foundation focused first on macroplastics. Rather than looking in the sea, the goal was to head for the natural barriers which are home to plastics. So for the sailors and scientists, it meant going to the beaches on these various islands looking for plastic debris that had traveled within these gyres for several years. The same protocol was applied to each beach. First, a scientific drone flew over the area to create an aerial map to quantify the plastic. Over an area of 100 meters, the plastic debris was then photographed, identified, sorted, and weighed. All this information was then entered into the database.
Origine Singapour.
The first problem is that of visual pollution, especially prominent on tourist sites. Then comes the issue of invasive species, which settle on floating plastic and migrate from one continent or island to another, disrupting ecosystems. Then there are the fish, turtles, and birds, whose bite marks are clearly visible. They swallow this plastic, endangering the survival of certain species and having us question the possible contamination within the food chain. The first observation made is that none of these island beaches within the gyres is plastic-free. Hard to find even 1 square meter of clean white sand. These idyllic beaches in tourist catalogs have become plastic warehouses.
I'm always shocked every time I go to the beach when I see the amount of plastics on the beaches here.
The Great North Pacific Gyre, receiving debris from the Asian continent, offloads an impressive amount of plastic on the island's beaches located between Japan and the Hawaiian archipelago.
The plastic is in every ocean. It's on every beach in the world. It's at the bottom of the ocean too. People used to go to the beach to collect seashells, collect driftwood. Now they go to the beach for beach cleanups.
Many activist associations have undertaken cleaning the beaches for quite some time now, but it is really just a remedial measure. More and more plastic continues arriving on beaches, and the problem is just getting worse. Even the most isolated, uninhabited atolls in the middle of the oceans are currently covered by plastic debris.
Oh, c'est à pleurer, Marco, là.
On se retrouve sur la partie au vent de l'île. Une vraie déchetterie. Voyez, on est au milieu de nulle part.
Seen from far off, most of the beaches visited looked like paradise on earth. But once on the beach, the reality was somewhat different. The crew was already appalled at the first stop on the Azores Islands, leaving them with a bitter taste of what to expect. Bottles, jerry cans, and other fishing material were found, along with the terrifying discovery of not just plastics, but microplastics, particles no larger than 5 millimeters. These are either pellets used for manufacturing plastic objects or the result of plastic deterioration in the oceans.
La marée, elle laisse des milliers de microparticules. Tu vois là, tout le long, là, c'est que de la microparticule.
Plastics trapped in the gyres undergo erosion from currents, salt, and the sun during their wandering years. Colonized by various hydrophobic pollutants, they end up breaking into smaller and smaller particles, which are partly ingested by marine fauna and birds, and the rest wash ashore along with the tides. The Race for Water Foundation team applied a specific protocol intended to gather microplastic samples. On each island visited, 2 to 5 beaches were studied to get exemplary results. 4 quadrants of 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters large and 10 centimeters deep were randomly selected on each beach. 2 of them close to the rack line, that is to say, where the waves dropped the debris during the high tide. For each quadrant, the sand was meticulously sifted, immersed in water, and the plastic particles floating on the water surface were collected one by one using tweezers to later be analyzed in a laboratory. The sample jars of microplastics were then sent to 3 laboratories both in Switzerland and France. The studies undertaken by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne aimed to quantify and determine the plastic types. At the Fribourg University, it is the pollutants discovered that are analyzed. The University of Bordeaux measures their toxicity on marine fauna and exposing fish larvae to samples brought back from the expedition.
Je pense qu'il n'y a personne qui a fait autant de prélèvements autour du monde avec la même méthode. Les autres chercheurs ont souvent étudié une région, une plage, un archipel, mais pas forcément toutes les plages qui sont au long de l'océan.
The scope of microplastic pollution is incredibly alarming in all of the oceans, notably in the Pacific Ocean. 4 to 5 jars of microplastics by quadrant on Easter Island, and up to 9 on the Big Island in Hawaii. The most worrisome aspect is when fish swallow these particles and related pollutants. They look so much like food. From the smallest to the biggest, these pollutants have become part of the food chain, and we, humans, are at the top of this food chain. Furthermore, these same pollutants are invading our beaches with their plastic guests. Today, collecting all microplastics is just not feasible. We don't know how to seize all of these billions of particles which are presently part of our beach and ocean landscape. Microplastics look like food for fish, leading to wholly contaminated marine resources which half the planet relies on.
Plastique, c'est tous des mésoparticules de plastique qui se sont détériorées avec le vent, la vague. Là, il y en a des milliers partout. T'as vu tous les oiseaux qui viennent filmer là tout à l'heure? Ouais. Là, ils mangent ça, tu vois. Une cinquantaine de mètres derrière moi, t'as un oiseau mort. Il a bu tout mangé de plastique. On l'a par terre, juste là autour de nous.
After having traveled 32,000 miles, the Race for Water Trimaran team experienced a dramatic event in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Il fait nuit, c'est 1h45 du matin. On a 2-3 mètres de vagues. Et soudain, il y a une rafale de vent qui arrive d'une façon très forte. On a plus de 40 km/h de vent en quelques secondes. Le bateau chavire définitivement. Il y a pas mal d'eau à l'intérieur du bateau.
The crew had to wait 2 days before being rescued by the English Royal Navy, who came from the Chagos archipelago. The boat was towed and then returned at the Diego Garcia base.
On est porté par ce projet et c'est pas ce chavirage qui va nous arrêter.
Even without its emblematic boat, the Foundation is continuing its world tour. With its very low cost price, plastic production is constantly growing, and the consequent drop of oil prices only adds to the increase in consumption. Plastic has invaded our everyday life and our oceans, having a direct impact on the food chain. Populations who depend on oceans for food are obviously the most exposed, and we talk more and more about the high risks due to pollutants transported by plastics.
Todos sabemos que el plástico se va desintegrando y va apareciendo, ya se hace microplástico. Los pescados se lo comen, lo he visto dentro de los pescados. He visto hasta botellas cortadas como forma para fabricar un embú dentro de la guata, dentro ya. Una jeringa también.
Cuando llegábamos a limpiar el pescado, se veía adentro las tapas de las bebidas de Coca-Cola, que a veces lo tiran al agua, el pescado se lo traga también, y al otro día uno limpia y sale el plástico adentro, la tapa de la Coca-Cola dentro del estómago del atún.
El mismo pescado come plástico, y al comer plástico nosotros consumimos ese pescado y ese plástico nos afecta a nosotros y en cierta manera nos penetra en nuestra sangre.
Plastic represents 80% of marine pollution. We have produced more over the last 10 years than over the entire last century, and we will produce, in the 10 years to come, more than the total overall production up to today. 50% of our planet's oxygen comes from the oceans and particularly plankton, in which more and more plastic microparticles are found which block their digestive and respiratory systems. In 2025, if nothing is undertaken to try managing this massive arrival of plastic in our oceans, we'll have, for every 3 kilos of fish, 1 kilo of plastic. The awakening of human consciousness worldwide and at all levels is a vital prerequisite to make people change their consumer behavior. It is first up to politicians to adapt national and international laws to promote respectful actions for our planet. It is also the responsibility of large industrialist groups to adopt more eco-responsible production methods. Last but not least, associations and foundations must continue their local actions, aiming at making people aware. Faced with such a vast and serious problem, the Foundation has multiplied the occasions to educate players around the world. From the United Nations headquarters to groups of children on isolated beaches and even military schools, Marco Simeoni and his crew pursue their assignment of informing people of this emergency situation.
The risk is to have also plastic in our stomach.
To be effective in making people aware, simple actions with quick positive results have to be proposed. For this, there's the rule of the 3 R's. Reduce our consumption by buying products without plastic. Reuse. Give plastic products a longer life instead of throwing them away immediately. And recycle, therefore giving existing plastic products a second life. Today, cleaning the oceans is an unsurmountable job, so the problem must be resolved at the source. This means limiting the amount of plastic thrown into rivers. For example, implementing different waste collection facilities, thereby giving value to plastic and allowing for a large number of street collectors to get into action. Also by reusing objects, throwaway cutlery and containers, single-use bags whose product life is on average about 20 minutes, are all aberrations which we should totally avoid today. It is vital to develop substitute biodegradable products and change consumer habits. It is better to have reusable and more solid bags that won't finish up in the sea, and flasks rather than astronomical amounts of PET bottles. Solutions do exist. The collection, storage, and the obvious recycling of household waste is an essential point, but too often unmanageable in developing countries or remote areas. It is important to implement local cleaning solutions for rivers and bays to stop the spreading of plastic pollution towards oceans. Furthermore, we must be able to rely on national and international legislations aiming to limit industrial pollution. The development and promotion of plastic recycling solutions starts with giving value to waste. It is then possible to implement practical solutions locally. A good example is that of the conversion into fuel and electricity, all from plastic. The Race for Water Odyssey has drawn up a report on our planet today regarding plastic pollutions in our oceans. The scientific results will be available during the year 2016, but the immediate assessment is quite clear. It is urgent that we act now to manage this problem, save the oceans and our most precious resource, water. As of 2016, the Race for Water Foundation wants to propose plastic waste recovery solutions to try to stop this incessant flow which is invading the oceans. What sort of planet do we want future generations to inherit? What kind of consumer habits and behaviors would we like them to have? Our challenge today is to give ourselves the means to meet this planetary challenge while there's still time.